Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. It's an honor, and I know you're gardeners, so your interest is really grounded in the plants. I am an artist, as was so lovely introduction. I have my background in botanicals specifically. I live in Katona. I am a gardener also. And that is really part of what started this whole journey, the beauty surrounding us and the need to preserve it. Botanical art is a genre of painting with its own set of guidelines. It isn't flower painting, and I just want to make that distinction now. Flower painting can be beautiful, florals. Botanical art deals with the exact classification, the exact structure of a plant to differentiate it from one species, variety from another. But I'd like you to follow the transitions from one form of the art as history evolved. The next form of botanical art evolves with it. So it is this whole long journey, and I'm going to start with this great painting, which is what you usually think of when you think of botanical art. These beautiful flowers of Redoute. He was a French painter, but it took over 1,000 years to evolve into this form of art. So I'm going to begin our journey with the earliest of woodcuts. And these woodcuts were done very crudely, but they were based on herbals. The idea that something was growing, it could be used for medicine, it better be recorded. And of course, there was no photography. So the only way of recording was the hand. This one is showing the absolute, don't eat it, don't drink it, the fear. Supposed to be a narcissus? Well, you're gardeners. Do those leaves look like narcissus leaves? I mean, but to make matters worse, what happened was that these plants, these drawings, were then copied and passed along and passed along. We have colored woodcuts now that may or may not resemble what they're supposed to. It looks sort of like a geranium leaf maybe here. Don't know what this one is. So the early botanicals really kept evolving, but they could be reproduced now. And then we go on and it becomes possible to produce them in mass. And we start forming the original herbals. Copies put together into books. By the 14th century, drawings of plants were used to decorate churches, and it became more mass-produced. But there was something called the Book of Hours. The Book of Hours were prayer books that were made for the wealthy patrons. As the 1400s moved into the 1500s, there was a real increase in actual observation to make the science of these plants much more recognizable. And one of the earliest was Albert Dürer. Dürer, he did engravings and etchings and very close studies of plants, and really was interested in observing firsthand and advancing our knowledge of the science of the plant. This was the earliest clear observations of botany, but not working from a microscope, not dissecting plants yet. That was later. So here we have, in the 1500s, these engravings that could be made, paintings that were made, and along comes Da Vinci. He was at the same time in history, and you know his anatomy studies, you know his incredible interest in all things science. So here's Da Vinci's early drawings, Conti crayons, and engravings. Now this one was in commemoration for the court of the Emperor Rudolph II. The interesting thing about this is that the illustrations were done by an artist named Hufnagel 15 years after the manuscripts about the garden were done. All right, so now we're talking about late 1500s, early 1600s. We're jumping ahead now almost 100 years. And in this book, things started becoming fanciful. Now, this is an image most of you, if you've looked at any of these, might recognize. And this was first published in 1613, and this is Bessler's Florilegium. So many plates from this book have been copied and printed and printed and printed over again. It is just the pictorial document of the flowers grown in one of the greatest German gardens at the time. The engraving really improved. It was good enough for the time. It gave information, and people were very excited. But then, during the Age of Exploration, 17th and 18th century, there was travel all over the world. And another Florilegium came into being. There were many, but I'm showing you another Florilegium that was a huge advancement in botanical art because of exploration. These ships went out. This one was, you can see the dates. It went out from England, France, went to Australia. And it was a 3-year expedition, the first of 3 expeditions. And on these ships, there were certainly the crew, and then you had to have the scientists, the artists, and everybody else that was needed, because what they would do, they would gather the plants, they'd bring them on board, they would draw them, they would paint them, they would press them, and then bring them home. We had women at this time. Maria Sibyl Marion, her story is fantastic. She was a mother of 2. She was divorced in 1685. And she and her daughter went to Suriname in 1699 because she wanted to study the butterflies. So this is how we learned of metamorphosis. So this woman, 1699, with her daughter, off to the Amazon, off to Suriname. They did not look like they were for a scientist, but it was about science. Now here's another one, and she's great. And I have to say, she is Mrs. Augusta Withers. Not Augusta Withers, not Withers. Mrs. Augusta Withers is her name. And this was 19th century when botanical art became prized as a female accomplishment. Her pears, though, have a ripeness that is, it's like you can almost smell them, just rotting. And one thing I'm just pointing out is, you notice the lighting? One of the traditions in botanical art is upper left lighting. Most of the time, it's not always, it's not, you will not be stricken down if you don't do it, but it is upper left lighting. And that's because it gives you an opportunity to see the most form. Now, with that came the Linnaeus classification system. This was the time, mid-1700s, towards the, mid-1700s, we get the era of Arrête and Aubry and Redoutes. All these people, the next group that I'm showing you, will overshadow all of the plant painters who came before them, and pretty much their artistic vision and their botanical accuracy from Carl Linnaeus onward is what shaped all of our botanical work. So we're really getting details now that we never saw before, never noticed, or could portray. So science and art went hand in hand. As the science increased, the art saw more. As the artists could do more, they found better ways to show it. These are watercolors. Look at this. Traditional botanical, the front view. But if you just see the front, you have no idea about the side. So you've got to show the side of the plant. But then you also need to show the back of the plant to get the full picture. Botanicals are always life-size. Coming up now into the 19th century with Redoute and his flowers. The traditional, when you think of botanical art, florilegium, cabbage roses, all that's going on, this is Redoute. He was the court painter for Napoleon Bonaparte's first wife, Josephine, at Malmaison, until we get to Rory McEwen. This is not a photograph. I mean, it's a photograph of a painting. Rory McEwen was a Scotchman, one of the greatest painters that ever lived. He put his life into the work. There's more soul in the paintings now than just for the glorification of the plant. And in current botanical art, not only are we dealing with all of the conventional customs, but it's the 21st century. And the 21st century is, is dealing with environmental awareness. The next portion is botanical art today, predominantly a study of my work, and I can point out the conventions and how to look at it. Okay, the coconut, the most used plant there is. Every single part of the coconut is used. And this particular plant, you can see everything from the husk, the shell, how the plant emerges, how the leaves go, and how it starts to mature. The form, the attention to detail, the absolute convention of upper left lighting. This is an ode to all the botanical art that I've ever studied. Native, now this was done as, it was part of a commission series. It is not a native plant. The daylily seems native because it's so ubiquitous. It is a naturalized plant, brought in, and was so happy. It did not become invasive, so we still like it, but it is naturalized. Native. This will show you all of the conventions, the lighting, but it also life cycles. You have the buds, you have the full flower, you have the dying flower, front, side, back, and also the leaves show the dropping petals and the amazing detail of the hairs on the stem. Sometimes you'll see raindrops, dewdrops, dried air, dried pieces. This was done for a grower, a breeder of orchids. This is Mrs. Rothschildianum's orchid, one of the Papillopetalums, side, back, front, and here you can see the stem is cut and it had been attached. So it gave me a chance not to use a 3-foot piece of paper. Herbals. These are tea-stained papers. The important part of the echinacea being its root, chicory, dissections, the flower stalk, detail, and if it's really blown up, you can see inside the pistil, the root, which is used for the coffee substitute, part of like a dandelion family. Digitalis, borderline. Digitalis, helpful for medicine, poison overdose. Too much is no good, a little bit is good. Now, I also use this convention of trompe-l'oeil, where you can feel the leaf going through the paper, but it's not, or the stem standing up, making a shadow, but it's not, and the interior cross-section, like Church did. Feverfew, dried petals are mostly used for it. Trompe-l'oeil, the posture of the plant. That means what the plant would look like, not does the plant droop, does it stand erect, does it spread? These are all. Then we get into what I love is the trompe-l'oeil. This is the lalab bean from a garden. Again, trompe-l'oeil, except you can't stick the whole stem through here. So that had to be presented as a tape down. And yet the branch is not attached. It's floating. So if you look at the leaf, it's imperative that there's a background. But the beans seem to be floating away from the leaf and about to fall off. This was part of a series of pressed specimens before the book was closed. So it was in honor of the full life, ginkgo biloba, before the book was closed. This was a commission. This was for somebody's garden. Peter Pan squash. This is her Florilegia, one piece. And the beauty, this was another commission. This was the beauty of, just for the glory of the hydrangeas in her garden. Velvet rose. This is a small piece, but again, all of these are life-size. So the early ones, the digital, not the oh come on, Cori, the daylily and the rudbeckia, those were big paintings because the plant is big. This is just a rose head, so it's small. This is done on something called vellum, which is a skin, calf skin, and you can see literally the veins in this skin. Glory of the tulips, calf skin. The veins were accentuated by brush. They were not as prominent. This is the Adrim tulip. And you can see a bit of the interior here. Corn, series of food products, Indian corn. Interesting thing that corn actually has a very specific number of kernels. And each of the silks, when growing, is attached to a kernel. And it does follow something called the Fibonacci sequence, and it's always the same. If you ever care to count the silks, count the kernels. This is Bird of Paradise leaf, because I just thought it had such architectural beauty and such an attitude that I wanted to paint it. So I did that for me. Again, it's also on a skin. Processing, botanical art, starts with a drawing, a very detailed, very precise, very specific pencil drawing. And it's corrected. And it's erased and it's corrected, and it's erased and it's corrected, and over and over and over again, it's drawn. Then it's toned or shaded using upper left lighting. This one is very loosely toned because it was for a magazine, and the next part of the process, after you do the drawing, after you do a tonal drawing, you transfer it to the watercolor paper, and after it's transferred, you can then do the painting. There's the final painting from that drawing. It went into the soybean, and it was, if I remember, it was dealing with the medical properties of soybeans and cancer. Silver point. I do a lot of work in silver point or metal point, and that is drawing with a sterling silver stylus, a rod of silver or gold into a mechanical pencil that is very lightly used like a pencil, but it's silver. It's a living drawing because it will tarnish forever. And this is a drawing done of dogwood twigs, 3 different kinds of dogwoods. And you can't erase silver point. You make a mark, you make a mark. And in order to build up the tonal quality, you have to let the silver oxidize, get a little textured, and then it will grab more silver and you can add another layer on top of it. This one is, this was gold. Gold doesn't tarnish as much. Silver really tarnishes, and you can see it's starting to turn. This is red clover, and it was a lucky day. Artichoke, still silver point, not pencil. The earliest of Da Vinci's work was in silver point. They didn't have graphite. This is a large piece. It's a tulip tree, all silver point. And it's showing a life cycle of the tree, climbing bittersweet branches, more silver point done on dark paper, the root of the hydrangea. And this is oh God, I'm really running. I did a whole series on Where Have All the Flowers Gone? That's a series dealing with what we're losing. The flowers were here. The flowers died, whether from pollution, climate change, flooding. What was left is the memory of the color that they were. White oak, sunflower, opium poppy, which is not just an ode to the destruction of the environment, but an ode to people. Garden flowers, that we are now in a changing garden zone. Pond life, perhaps invasive, perhaps under control, but polluted nevertheless. The joy of flowers that we are losing because of insects and climate change and da-da-da-da-da-da. Invasives, bamboo. Gorgeous, kept under control. And the last part, and I know I'm got to go very quickly, this is the part that to me is, that really speaks loudest. Does not look like an botanical at all. This is what I'm working in now. This is climate change. It's the extension of my botanical work, my heart and soul. It is heat. It is climate change. It is destruction. And it delivers a really loud message when you know what I'm saying. Abstract work, it allows room for you to imagine and think and come to your own thoughts. This is air quality alert. You remember the fires coming down from Canada. This is what I saw. Air quality alert. How does that affect botanicals? How does that affect people? How does that affect our lives? Fire. I don't need to say too much about it. These are all paintings that are 3 feet by 5 feet, oil on canvas, and not framed. They're hanging on a wooden dowel because the movement and the organic quality of the canvas adds to the curiosity and the thought and maybe the heart. This is truly science creating something in my head that comes out of my arm and hand and is there. And then we have this, bees. This is the buzz. I'm working now on bee projects, thinking about what has happened. Honeybees, it gives the feeling of the bee, the honey, the busyness, the need for community, the need to pay attention. I sort of think of these bees as the canary in the mines. Not just honeybees, I mean, those are not native, but all of our native bees. And I know you heard DJ when he was here, some of you, didn't you have a lecture from Dennis about the bees? I've worked with him for a year now, and Oh, near my heart. This is my studio. All of these are individual bee paintings that will go on exhibit sometime in October. There's about 150 of them, and they're just swarming. It's just creating. Where? It's on my website are the listings. I'll talk to you about it. And this is the last of the bee series that I posted. This is Life Without Bees Isn't. And these are all gold paint and oils, and it could be water, it could be air, could be. But without the bees, it isn't anything. And that is where I conclude the slide presentation. Is it botanical? It comes from botanicals. It is the direction that botanical artists are going in, not necessarily abstract, but dealing with the environment, the pollution, the air quality, the water, our planet. And so if I can make people, through my art, in any way, become aware, that's my calling. That is what, to me, botanical art and art is about. It's still the story of plants. It's what's happening and what could happen or what we can do to preserve. And I tried to fit it all in quickly. I'm sorry I kept you.